Hello, welcome to the Bible Standard. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe, and drop a comment in the comments area if you have any questions. We'll do our best to reply.
As Tim said, you had an expectation that the reading would be Ezekiel 38, verses 1 to 13, because it's been that for the last 4 years. And as I was preparing this talk, brothers and sisters, I thought to myself how similar it's going to be to the past 3 or 4 years. And that's because the main centres of interest to us are still in play. All right, the things that started, for example, in Ukraine in early 2022 are still ongoing. The things in the Middle East that we've been looking at, the West Bank, the Gaza Strip, are still ongoing. But Bible prophecy is being fulfilled. And so tonight I'm going to bring you up to date on what's been happening over the last 12 months or so, and see how progress has been made towards what we know has to happen. And Ezekiel 38, verses 1 to 13, tells us exactly what has to happen. And so we're going to go away, I believe, confident that the angels are at work, as Tim mentioned in his prayer, and that the day will come. Now, as far as I'm concerned, brothers and sisters, I wanted it to come a long time ago. But it hasn't come. And I believe that the time that we have been spending this last 12 months, and maybe a little bit more, we don't know, is our final test. It is the testing time for the brotherhood. And if my ears are telling me what's really going on, then I know that a lot of our people are not passing the test. Every day I receive reports of people who have turned their back and walked away. You know them too, don't you? It's happening. So why is it being stretched out? Well, we read in Peter, 1 Peter 3, that the long suffering of God waited in the days of Noah. Why? Well, Peter tells us in his second epistle that we should see it as unto salvation. It should be an opportunity for salvation. But of course, some don't see it that way, and they've left and departed. So this is the challenge for you and me. So if tonight does nothing else, I hope it consolidates your appreciation that God is at work in the earth, and that these things will ultimately transpire as the Bible says they must, and Christ will come, and we will have a reward for faithfulness. That's what tonight is all about. So brothers and sisters, we're going to review tonight a few things. This is what we're going to consider. We will review the impact on Bible prophecy of the second Trump presidency, which began on the 20th of January this year. The impact of Trump's approach to the war in Ukraine and its implications for Europe. How his intervention in the Middle East has impacted Israel's war with Hamas and its other enemies. The future of the West Bank and Gaza, and the impact of Trump's tariffs and trade policies on the world economy and the looming collapse that is inevitable. Now, you will say, well, didn't you deal with those things last year? Yes, we did, but there has been some progress. So let's review again in our minds what Ezekiel 38 verses 1 to 13 requires. Verse 2 requires that there be a very prominent and powerful dictator who dominates the entire Eurasian continent. Now that word Eurasian, look it up, it means Europe and Asia, that entire northern area north of Israel. Verses 5 and 6 tell us that the territory east and north of Israel will be under Gogian control, because that dictator is called Gog. It's a title of the one at the top. Verse 6 tells us that there will be a dependent Europe that falls under Gog's political control without the need for warfare. That's a very important point. Verse 8 tells us that the West Bank will be part of Israel proper. Verses 8 to 11 tell us that Israel will be at peace both internally and with its near neighbours at the time of Armageddon. Verse 12 tells us that Israel will be very prosperous and envied by the rest of the world. And verse 13 tells us that the first to object to the Gogian invasion of the land of Israel will be Israel's allies in the Middle East. Who are they? Yemen. Really? Yemen is a hardcore enemy of Israel right now, but it'll change in due time. Saudi Arabia, they're coming along. The Gulf states, yes, some of them are in the Abraham Accord. They will be the first to oppose the Gogian invasion. And behind them will become Britain and the young lions, of which Australia, of course, is one. So that's what Ezekiel 38, verse 1 to 13 require. Let's have a look then and see what's happening in relation to these things. Now, I know that you know that when Donald Trump was elected the first time, we had wonderful prospects in relation to Bible prophecy. It didn't turn out quite as we thought, but now he's in office again. And the second Trump presidency has, of course, brought about some huge changes for our world. Look at America internally right now. He presides over a totally divided country. They are more divided today than they were in the 1860s in the Civil War. He has turned the world upside down with his tariffs and his policies in relation to other nations, most of whom, of course, are supposedly allies of America. And we know that this man has been put there for a purpose, just as Daniel 4:17 tells us, that the Most High ruleth in the kingdom of men. He giveth it to whomsoever he will. He setteth up over it the basest of men. I need say no more. So here we've got Donald Trump in office, and look at what has happened in our world. These are the things that I believe are increasingly likely outcomes of his second presidency. The imposition of a temporary peace on the Middle East, you can say it's almost there, including a resolution of the Palestinian issue. The extension of the Abraham Accord to include Saudi Arabia and other Middle East nations. Further withdrawal of support from Ukraine, because he's already withdrawn some of it, forcing ultimately a capitulation to Russia, initially ceding the captured territory they already have, which will ultimately lead, of course, in the final outcome to complete Russian rule of the Ukraine. The isolation of America from its traditional allies through the America First policy, and the triggering of the looming depression by tariff wars and the chaos that is now evident in the financial institutions of the globe. There's a lot of trouble out there. Now, these are the potential outcomes from Trump. So we've seen what is most likely in accordance with Scripture, but looking a bit further down the track, there might be, I believe, the withdrawing of the financial support from NATO, resulting in its dissolution. He threatened that in his first presidency. And, of course, he made it clear that unless NATO coughed up money, then he would withdraw American support. Well, it's not quite got there yet, but it's certainly looking a possibility in the future. That will be in the end of NATO. We'll see some European nations seeking an alliance with Russia. A bit more about that later on. There will be an impetus given to the rapid rise of far-right political parties in Europe who have openly declared policies to align with Russia. More about that later. That will result in the dissolution of the European Union in its present form. That has to happen, by the way. And if Trump's policies trigger a depression, 10 nations to the south of the Rhine and the Danube, which is the old territory of the Roman Empire, will emerge to fulfill Daniel chapter 7, verse 7 and verse 11. Now, you know what Daniel 7, verse 7 says? It's about the fourth beast. And verse 11 says that Christ and the saints will destroy the fourth beast. You cannot destroy something that's not there. So the fourth beast has to be there in the latter days. It has to be a revival of the Roman Empire of old. So where was it? Where was this area of the Roman Empire of old that has to be restored? Well, it's there, right? This is the area of what we would call Western Europe. And there will be 10 nations who will emerge from the depression that's coming because they'll have no option. They'll be independent nations, by the way. There won't be this cross-border stuff without rulership. They'll be independent nations. That's what the Scripture says in Revelation 17, verse 12. But they will be locked together under the tutelage of the Pope. He has to assume great power, according to Bible prophecy, in the future. And we will have what really is evident already. The revival of the beast of the sea, that is the papacy with growing political influence, it will become massive. The fourth beast of Daniel 7, verse 7, as I mentioned, has to be recreated. And that means we're going to have what Revelation 17 calls Babylon the Great, the Catholic opposition to the rule of Christ after Armageddon. Okay, so there's an introduction of what we hope to cover this evening, at least in some measure. Let's turn then to the war in Ukraine. We need to be clear about what Ezekiel 38 verse 2 requires. So here you've got two literal translations, Rotherham's and the Amplified Bible. And the words that I really want you to focus on are the words in purple. You see there it says, Son of Man, set thy face against Gog. That's that title of the one at the top, the dictator. He's of the land of Magog. If you've got a King James Version on your lap, it doesn't say that. All right, and that's an alteration, an addition you need to make to the King James Version. He's of the land of Magog. Now, if I look at your passport, I will find out that you are of the land of Australia. True? Yeah. So this means that he's of the land of Magog. You've got to find out where Magog is. You can determine where Magog is, you can determine where Gog will form his plans for the invasion of the Middle East, because that's what Ezekiel 38 is about. Now, the Amplified Bible says exactly the same thing. This is the correct translation. So where is this Magog? Well, you see a flashing arrow on the screen. That is the Magog of history. Now, it doesn't tell you where the borders are because you need to look a bit closer. But you can see around that you've got other nations that are mentioned in Ezekiel 38. You've got your Rosh, your Meshech, your Tubal, your Gomers, and so on. Tagamas. So we want to find out where Magog historically is. So where is it? Well, I've been challenged on this. I've had people write to me over the years and say, are you sure about this? I said, go and look at the historians. They've come back and said, you know what? It's pretty right. Maybe you haven't got the red line in exactly the right position all the way around, but you're right. This is the Magog of history that historians will tell you existed. And it's got in it, you'll notice, on the left or western side of that red bulge in the middle, okay, it's got in it Germany. And we have traditionally said, Magog is Germany. Well, yes, Germany's included in Magog. But Magog is bigger than Germany, all right? Magog includes Ukraine and Belarus, and they are the two largest countries within the border of what was known as Magog, Ukraine and Belarus. So when we're talking about Ezekiel 38, we're really talking about Ukraine and Belarus. I'm going to show you something what Putin said about those two countries in a moment. Got a bit of a picture? Putin believes that he is going to be the next greatest Vladimir because his hero is Vladimir I. And you see there a reference at the top of the yellow on that map. You see this was the empire of Vladimir the Great or Vladimir I. He's Putin's hero. And he wants to be Vladimir II. But you can't be Vladimir II unless you have the territory of Vladimir I. What is it? Well, the yellow tells you where it is. It was called Kievan Rus, and it includes Ukraine and Belarus, a portion of Russia. That was the kingdom of the original kingdom of the Rus. That's where we get Rosh from in Ezekiel 38 verse 2. It's a reference to Russia. And Kiev was the historic capital in medieval times of the Kievan Rus. From 879 AD to 1240 AD, it's quite a lengthy period of time. That's why, of course, when Putin attacked on the 24th of February 2022, he headed straight for Kiev. All right? He wants Kiev back. So why does he want Kiev back? Well, if you went back to that previous slide, it told you why. Because of religion. Do you know that? Not just politics, not just territory. It's because of religion. Because the Ukrainian Russian Orthodox Church separated itself from the Moscow Patriarchate of the Russian Orthodox Church about 3 or 4 years ago. And Putin, of course, is close. He's close to the leader of the Russian Orthodox Church, and he was asked to get it back. You've got to get Ukraine back. It'd be like taking South America from the Catholic Church. What do you reckon the Catholics would do about that? All right? That's the equivalent. Take South America from the Catholic Church. They wouldn't just sit there and twiddle their thumbs, would they? And neither has Putin. He wants Ukraine back for good reasons. One, because it's politically what he wants to achieve in relation to his greatness as Vladimir II, but he also wants them back in the church. Which is why, of course, there's calls from the Russian Orthodox Church in Russia to stop the gay marches, to stop the liberal tendencies in Ukraine. They want to put an end to all of that, all right? So this is why it's happening, brothers and sisters. And if you have not read the lengthy article by Vladimir Putin on the 12th of July, 2021, which you can look it up on the internet, it's all there. If you haven't read that, you should, because it tells you exactly what is happening now and why it's happening now and why it will culminate in a fulfilment of Bible prophecy. This is what Putin said in that article. I'm going to show you a bit more of it in a minute. He said Russians and Ukrainians were one people, a single whole, all descendants of ancient Rus. You see the yellow? Kievan Rus? All descendants of ancient Rus. Yeah, he's going to get it back. Now, this is just one small snippet from that article. It goes on for pages. This is what he said. By the way, brothers and sisters, Putin knows his history. He knows his history better than you know, and I know. All right? He is a historian. He said this: Russians, Ukrainians, and Belarusians, now, Belarus has got RUS in it, so it tells you where they came from. Belarusians are all descendants of ancient Rus, which was the largest state in Europe. Slavic and other tribes across the vast territory from Ladoga, Novgorod, Suk, to Kiev and Chernigov were bound together by one language, which we now refer to as Old Russian. Economic ties, the rule of the princes of the Rurik dynasty, and after the baptism of Rus, he's talking about the conversion of Vladimir I to Christianity. He says, after the baptism of the Rus, the Orthodox faith, he means the Russian Orthodox Church. The spiritual choice made by St. Vladimir, who was both Prince of Novgorod and Grand Prince of Kiev, still largely determines our affinity today. Now, you notice that was the 12th of July, 2021. When did Russia invade Ukraine? 24th of February, 2022. It took him a little over 6 months to put into practice what he had put in that article. The world should know they have wasted trillions of dollars trying to defend Ukraine. The Bible says Ukraine will be part of Russia at the time of Armageddon. And you and I are watching it happen. I want to show you what's happening. Right? It's going to end that way. Now, it's painful, it's very costly, it's taking a long time, but that is what will happen because it's a religious war as much as a political one. So what's the current situation in Ukraine? Well, the war's not going well for Ukraine. That's the most obvious thing. Russian forces in the east are making steady progress, taking towns and cities, they've just taken one the last week, one by one, albeit at a tremendous cost. You know what Donald Trump said about a week ago? 27,000 soldiers are dying in that war every month. Most of them are Russians. But he doesn't care about that. He can call on 5 million. The Ukrainians could call on initially about 500,000. Now they're down to 350,000. And I'll tell you one of the reasons for that. Desertions from the army. Did you know that? Desertions from the Ukrainian army. Ukraine has been steadily drained of fighting men, weapons and ammunition. Desertions from the army are increasing rapidly as Russia gains ground. Why would you put your life on the line when you know it's not going to turn out very well? So a lot of Ukrainians who were very keen about the idea of fighting Russians are no longer very keen about it. And if you look, you can't avoid this, you get onto YouTube or something like that, and you see all these Ukrainian women who want to come to Australia, find a husband in Australia. You seen them? Yeah. Why wouldn't you? They're getting out. And the Ukrainians are sick to death of not being able to sleep at night because of drone and missile attacks, taking down their infrastructure, their electricity, so you've got no power for days or weeks on end. They're sick of it, like you would be. So where this is going to end up is pretty obvious. to anybody that's looking at it squarely. Vital infrastructure, as I said, is being destroyed progressively, little by little, and a lot of heartache and pain is being inflicted on that country. It's all unnecessary. If they just read their Bible, go back to the Russian Orthodox Church, let Putin rule you. Of course, the world thinks that's nonsense, but the Bible says it's going to happen. So this is the Russian conquest in Ukraine so far. You see those pinkish areas on that map? Over in the east, in the Donbass, etc. But I want to just talk about Odessa. A couple of weeks ago, I saw an article from a so-called expert on Ukraine. And he said that if Odessa, and you can see where that red arrow is pointing, that's the only effective port that Ukraine has. Ukraine, by the way, is the breadbasket of Eurasia. Most of the wheat and crops that are grown in Ukraine. All right? They've got vast plains on which they can grow wheat and other crops. But you've got to export them to get the money for them. You need a port to do that. Well, Odessa is their port at the moment. And this expert said that if Odessa falls to Russia, that will be the end of Ukraine. Not only will it not be able to export what it creates, but it won't be able to import the things it needs to continue the war. So it doesn't look very good for Ukraine. Now, you've probably heard about the toings and froings of Trump, who wants to impose peace in Ukraine. And you've probably heard about they're wearing out the airlines going backwards and forwards for meetings over the course of this year. The latest one is the report here in December the 2nd. Russia says meaningful meeting with US on Ukraine peace proposal ends no closer to deal. Speaking ahead of his meeting with Witkoff and Kushner, that's Trump's son-in-law, Putin said Russia was prepared to involve European states in negotiations as long as they recognise what he called the realities on the battlefield. In other words, you saw those pink areas that they've already conquered. Yeah, he says, well, we're not giving them back. We're certainly not giving Crimea back, which we took in 2014. You're not getting that back. That's the realities of the battlefield. So that's the line in the sand as far as he's concerned. But then he said this: we have no intention of fighting Europe. Now, why would he say that? Well, because you see, some European nations are foolishly saying that they're going to form an organisation, an army, that will go in and help the Ukrainians fight against the Russians. You know what that means? They're fighting Russia. And this is what he said. This is his warning. He said, we have no intention of fighting Europe. I've said that 100 times. But if Europe wants to fight again and starts, then we are ready for that immediately. Now, if I was a European leader, I would be having second thoughts about creating an army to go and support the Ukrainian army, wouldn't you? Yeah. So this is what's happening, brothers and sisters, in Ukraine. Now, do I need to say any more about this? Is it pretty obvious to you that the Bible's going to be fulfilled pretty soon? We don't know how long it's going to take, but a year, 2, I don't really care. We are watching it happen, and it will happen. But there's another problem for Ukraine and the European nations, particularly some in NATO. And it's this. This article you'll see is 15th of September this year. It says this: can NATO countries stop buying Russian oil, as Trump demands? Now, Trump's a deal maker, but he's also got a little bit of common sense. What he's saying is, you European nations want to support Ukraine, but you're still buying Russian oil. Some of them were, but they're not all of them anymore. There's Hungary, Slovakia and Turkey who are involved. All right. So he's got a point, hasn't he? US President Donald Trump has said NATO countries should stop buying Russian oil if they want Washington to tighten sanctions on Moscow. But achieving this could be time-consuming and challenging. Only 3 NATO nations currently import Russian crude: Hungary, Slovakia and Turkey. Of the 3, Turkey is the big one. According to our data, Turkey is the 3rd largest Russian oil importer globally, said one expert. And you'll notice down the bottom that we say that India and China also import Russian oil. And of course, that's just been arranged in the last week in India. They're going to continue to buy Russian oil. This is a problem, isn't it? Because if they continue to do that, Russia can continue the war. So the sanctions are not working. And that, of course, means that ultimately Russians will overtake Ukraine. And when they do, the European nations are going to have to rethink their policy towards Russia. Because you see, there are people in the wings like this lady. I put this up many times, so you probably have heard this before. This is Marine Le Pen, hard right-wing politician in France. An article in 2016 when she was standing for election in the presidential election said France has a major far-right Eurosceptic, which means she wants to get rid of the European Union, an openly pro-Russian party that receives funding from the Kremlin. That cost her a few votes, by the way, that revelation. As leader of the National Front, she advocates leaving the Eurozone, withdrawal from NATO, abolition of the International Monetary Fund, limits on immigration, and forging what she calls a privileged partnership with Russia. Read Ezekiel 38, verses 5 and 6. Because that's exactly what it says. Russia will not need to invade Western Europe. They will fall into their lap because of parties like this. And when the depression comes, brothers and sisters, guess who's going to get in power? Not the idiots who have bankrupted France and Germany, that's for sure. The people will put these kind of people in power. They almost got there in the German elections a little while ago, earlier this year. They're the second most powerful party in Germany right now. So who's going to get into power when the depression comes? Yeah, I know. And we're going to have a fulfilment of Ezekiel 38, 5 and 6. So brothers and sisters, we are watching some really interesting things happen. Now, if you wonder why this woman supports Putin, there are many reasons for it, but the one down the bottom is important. See that one down the bottom? Marine Le Pen described Russian President Vladimir Putin as a defender of the Christian heritage of European civilization. Wow. In other words, when the papacy gets its power back in Europe, yeah, it's got people like that ruling nations like France. Can you see where that's going? To me, that's terrific. It's terrific. I wish it happened yesterday, 10 years ago. It hasn't. But it is happening, brothers and sisters. And we need to hang on because it will one day come to pass. And just one more point in relation to Ukraine and Europe. This is an article February earlier this year. UK's Starmer announces defence spending boost ahead of Trump meeting. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer pledged the biggest sustained increase in defence spending since the end of the Cold War, as he readies to meet NATO sceptic US President Donald Trump later this week in Washington. And of course it goes on to talk about, and many leaders have said the increased spending must continue to counter the growing military threat from Moscow. So Joel 3 says, wake up the mighty men, right? Let them prepare their arms, let them beat their ploughshares into swords and so on. Wake them up. Yeah. Starmer's been woken up. And he's not the only one. And Britain, which of course has this socialist left-wing government who don't normally like spending money on defence, are now forced to spend money on defence. And of course Ezekiel 38:13 tells us that Britain will be one of the opponents of Gog when that invasion comes. Okay, let's turn to the Middle East. Many things have been happening in the Middle East this year. What about Trump in the Middle East? Well, one of the boasts of Trump during the election campaign last year was that he would bring peace to both the Middle East and to Ukraine in a very short space of time. He's been trying very hard with Ukraine. He wants a Nobel Peace Prize, all right? And he doesn't care who's in his way. He's going to sweep them aside, as you're going to see in a minute. All right? He wants a Nobel Peace Prize. He wants that to be part of his heritage. You know, it's good for his ego, which he has a lot of. So here is a man who's in there for one purpose. It's not in order to bring peace so much. It is for him. So he boasted about both the Middle East and Ukraine. He also said that he would bring Saudi Arabia into the Abraham Accord. Now, that's not possible without a Palestinian state. And I want to show you that. Israel and the US decimated, of course, Iran's nuclear program in joint bombing raids. You'll remember that. That was one of the big events of the year. And they wiped out the underground nuclear facilities in Iran. And, of course, Israel has knocked over Iran's proxies like Hezbollah. They've quietened down the Houthis in Yemen. They've almost destroyed Hamas in Gaza. So Iran's not doing very well. They've lost all of it, most of their proxies. And regime fall is anticipated in Iran. And the latest crisis is not going to help the mullahs who are in control of that country. You know why? There's no water. Seen this report? See the date on that report? 5th of December. What's today? 10th. It's 5 days ago. Tehran may be evacuated as taps run dry due to water crisis. Senator John Fetterman in the US Congress said, Iran spent billions to destroy Israel instead of spending it on water. This Pennsylvania senator noted that the money Iran put into its nuclear weapons program could have gone towards solving the country's water crisis, as water is on the verge of running out in Tehran. Tehran has a population of 9 million people, 4 times the population of Brisbane. No water. Turn your tap on. Nothing comes out. Do you like being in that situation? You reckon that the regime's going to succeed? You reckon that they're going to be popular in the next election? So here we've got a country that is in deep trouble. And what we've got, brothers and sisters, is another projected fulfilment of Bible prophecy. Because you know what it says? That Gog has in its confederacy a power called Persia. Now that doesn't mean just Iran. When it says Persia in Ezekiel 38 verse 6, it's actually from Syria right across to Pakistan. It's the old Seleucid kingdom, all right? And we'll have a little bit more to say about that in a moment. So here we've got things happening that are forcing change on Iran. But there's also, of course, big changes that have occurred in Syria. Now, Syria was ruled for decades by the Assads, the latest Bashir, who's now a refugee in Moscow. And, of course, big changes have come to that country. On the 27th of November 2024, a coalition of opposition groups called the Military Operations Command launched a major offensive against the Syrian army and other pro-government forces in Aleppo, Idlib, Hama and Homs governance. The Assad regime was overthrown in just 11 days. They were swept aside. They'd done pretty well against ISIS, but they were swept away in 11 days. On the 29th of January 2025, Syrian de facto leader Ahmed al-Sharaa was appointed president of Syria by the Syrian General Command. And on the 29th of March this year, he formed a transitional government. Now, I asked the question here. See those 2 little pictures there? That's the same man. All right. The top one is when he was the leader of a terrorist group. He was declared to be an international terrorist. There was a bounty on his head. Now he's cuddling up to Donald Trump. See, he's got a suit on. Look at him. He's got a suit and tie on. He's operating like a Western politician. Would you trust that man? Trump does. Trump trusts him to the point that he's prepared to bully Israel over Syria. This tells you something about Donald Trump. Here's an article, December the 2nd. That's not very long ago, is it? A week ago. Trump pushes Israel to embrace Sharia, forcing Israel to reassess their Syria doctrine. His shift forces Israel to confront a core dilemma. Are its raids upon Syria neutralising threats in Syria or nurturing new ones? He's bullying Israel. He's saying, well, I want to make a deal with this man. I'm a deal maker. I want to have peace. I want to get a Nobel Peace Prize. Don't stand in my way, Israel. That's telling you something about this man. He, brothers and sisters, is one of those who you could call the basest of men. Daniel 4:17. 3rd December this year, the United Nations General Assembly approved a resolution calling on Israel to withdraw from the Golan Heights, which they're likely to do never. And Tuesday vote. Some 123 countries voted in favour of the resolution. 7 voted against it. That would include the United States, by the way, because Donald Trump said that the Golan Heights belongs to Israel. So he's in a bit of a cleft stick, isn't he? How's he going to make friends with that guy when he says, no, the Golan Heights belongs to Israel? So here you've got the nations trying to put pressure on Israel, as indeed Trump is himself. So what next for Syria? Well, there are 3 prophecies that determine Syria's future. They are Daniel 7 verse 7, and I just made mention of that and we'll come back to that in a second. Daniel 11 verse 40, which we'll briefly mention, and Isaiah 17. Now, Daniel 7 verse 7 requires that the revived 4th beast will conquer the residue, what's called the residue of the Medo-Persian and Greek empires in the east. And I'll show you a map of that in a minute. Daniel 11 verse 40 calls the Gogian invader the king of the north. Now that, of course, was the title of the Seleucid kings. Seleucus was one of the generals of Alexander. He created a kingdom from Syria across to the Indus River in Pakistan. It was called in the Bible the king of the north. Now Russia has to be the king of the north, according to Daniel 11 verse 40. Isaiah 17 prophesies a repeat of history. The latter-day Assyrian, or Gog, will remove the Syrian ruler and destroy Damascus. It's already half destroyed, by the way. That history of the past presaged what will happen in the future. And it's going to happen. Now, I don't have time to go through those 3 references in any detail, of course, but have a look at some maps. What you see there is, of course, the empire of Alexander the Great, right across to the Indus River, which is now in Pakistan. It started over in Syria, at least the eastern portion of it. And when Seleucus came to office, he created what was called the Seleucid kingdom, the king of the north of Daniel 11. And this is the territory that Gog is going to have to take before, listen to what I'm saying, before they conquer Constantinople. You cannot be the king of the north unless you are what the king of the north used to be. What were they? Foreign occupiers of the territory from Syria to Pakistan. Now, if you've been following the news, you know that Russia is tinkering in that area. It includes Iran, all right? It includes Iran. They're tinkering with Pakistan. They've threatened Afghanistan, all right? They're tinkering with Iran. They're certainly in Syria, all right? So this is going to happen eventually, brothers and sisters. Gog will sweep through that area, probably after the Great Depression begins. Then, at some point later, they can make their attack on Constantinople. They then become the eastern leg of the Image Empire. Then they can make their attack from there down the coastal strip of Israel and into Egypt, as Daniel 11 goes on to say. That's about all I'm going to say on that. But you get a bit of an idea? Things are happening. So let's then turn to Israel itself. Now, those of you who have heard me talk about this probably think this is like a broken record. This guy can't talk about anything else. Well, I have to, right? I have to. Ezekiel 38 verse 8, what did it say? Remember what it said? Let's just read that verse again. Ezekiel 38 and verse 8. And after many days, thou, he's talking to Gog, thou shalt be visited in the latter years, which is called over in verse 16, the latter days. I know that some of you highlighted those 2 phrases, and so you should. Thou shalt come into the land that is brought back from the sword, and is gathered out of many peoples, plural, against the mountains of Israel. Now, it doesn't say the mountains of Palestine. It says the mountains of Israel. So we want to find out where these mountains of Israel are, because if we can determine that, we can determine that Israel is going to annex the West Bank. And they're in the process of doing that this year, as you're going to see. So where are these mountains of Israel? 90% of the hills and the mountains in the central massif of the land of Israel are in what's called by the nations, not by Israel, but by the nations, is called the West Bank. Because, of course, it was taken in 1967 by Israel from Jordan. And Jordan had the Jordan River that went down the middle of their country. They had an East Bank and they had a West Bank. But Israel doesn't see it now as a West Bank of Jordan. They call it Judea and Samaria. All right, so Judah in the south, Samaria in the north. 90% of the mountains of Israel are in the so-called West Bank. And Ezekiel 38 verse 12 tells you where it is. Look at verse 12. The end of the verse says that the people who dwell there, the Israelites, it says they've gotten cattle and goods that dwell in the midst of the land. The Hebrew word is tabur. It means the centre, the midst, or the navel, just like Rotherham's translation. See that on the screen? Dwelling upon the navel of the earth. That word earth is eretz. It can be rendered land just as easily. The navel of the land. Where is that? Well, we know that in Psalm 133, the land's presented as a body. Mount Hermon is the hoary head. There's two mountain ranges down near Beersheba. They are the legs. You've got the rib cage of the Carmel Range. You've got the finger and arm pointing out, Carmel Range, all right? The land is like a body. Where's the navel? Right smack in the middle of the West Bank. Right here. This place. All right? Because the Assyrian of old, as Isaiah 10 tells us, the Assyrian of old, when he came into the land in the days of Hezekiah, came down the mountains of Israel. And it's specified. See those green names? It specifies where he came. Exactly where Gog's going to come. The latter day Assyrian. And they're all north of Jerusalem. In what we would call the West Bank, but what Israel calls Samaria. All right? Bible prophecy is being fulfilled, brothers and sisters. Israel's preparing for the annexation of the West Bank. Israeli Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich lays the groundwork for West Bank annexation in 2025. This article in November last year said. He said the year 2025 will be the year of sovereignty for Judea and Samaria. He also said Trump's victory also brings with it an important opportunity for the state of Israel. We were a step away from applying sovereignty to the settlements in Judea and Samaria, and now is the time to do it. The only problem is that even their government, their cabinet is divided. All right, so he's got a problem. But both political parties in Israel, the big ones, have the same policy. And that policy is the annexation of the West Bank. So it's going to happen. Whether it happens this year or next year or beyond, I don't know. But it will happen. There will be the annexation of the West Bank. So what's Israel likely to do, do you think? Now that things are quietened down a bit in Gaza, they haven't got quite so many troops down there, what do you think they're doing? This tells you. This is the 26th of November this year. Israeli forces launched major West Bank counter-terrorism raid. Imposed curfew. The IDF and Shin Bet launched a wide-scale operation overnight in the northern West Bank, citing attempts by terror groups to entrench themselves there. So while Hamas in Gaza has lost, of course, a lot of its clout, now they've got their operatives working in the West Bank, and Israel's not going to tolerate that. And there's something else happening in the West Bank. The Israeli government is turning a blind eye to settler ransacking of Palestinian farms and land holdings in the West Bank, or Judea and Samaria. They are intent on annexing it in response to the recent United Nations resolution on a Palestinian state. It's incredible how the angels work, brothers and sisters. They pushed the nations to go and vote for a Palestinian state, what would you do if you were the leaders of Israel? I know what I would do. I'd make sure that they couldn't possibly have a Palestinian state in the West Bank. I'd get rid of the Palestinians, which is exactly what's happening. Have you seen pictures of bulldozers? You know those big things they use to knock down buildings with a big spike on the front? Boom, boom. You seen them? Yeah, they're using them against Palestinians' houses in the West Bank. Have a look at it. Because you see they're getting rid of people because they're going to annex it and put their own people there. That's why Bible prophecy is being fulfilled. But what about the Gaza Strip? Well, when we were in the old city of Jerusalem back in October, I took a photo of signs. They were all over the place. See that sign there? It was on the wall of the Jewish quarter in Jerusalem. Make Gaza Jewish again. And there are a couple of very strong ministers in Netanyahu's government that are pushing for the Jews to take complete control of Gaza and to put Jews back into it. Not going to happen. It's not going to happen. So let's have a look at that. Now, this article, 18th of November this year, said UN votes delivers a heavy blow to Israel's right wing and rewrites the Gaza future. UN Security Council's new framework for Gaza delivers a heavy setback to Israel's right wing, rejects its core demands and marks a decisive shift toward international oversight, expanded regional involvement. We're going to have a bit of a look at that. Now, Israel, of course, is opposed to the Palestinian state. This article, 15th of October this year. Despite war's end, Smotrich calls for renewed Jewish settlement in Gaza. Speaking in Sirot after the hostage returns, Finance Minister says settlement key to long-term security. Strzok warns New Deal lacks firm guarantees on Hamas disarmament or Israeli control, fueling tensions within Netanyahu's coalition. So they're fighting amongst themselves in the government over this matter. Illegal settler outposts. This was from The Independent on the 5th of December, just a few days ago. Illegal settler outposts are rapidly spreading across the West Bank, linked to growing settler violence. This intimidation, which Palestinians and activists say is rarely prosecuted by Israel, is forcing Palestinian families that have been on the land for generations to flee. Not going to get any better, because Israel is going to annex the West Bank. Bible prophecy will be fulfilled. But there's world pressure for a Palestinian state, isn't there? This article, September this year. 80% of world recognises Palestinian state. The country's joining anti-Israel diplomatic wave. A global wave of Palestinian state recognition gains momentum as France, Belgium and others join the UK and the EU nations in a diplomatic surge against Israel and seeks to reshape the path toward a two-state solution. Now, we've all, of course, witnessed that in September this year. So where's this going to lead, do you think? So what does Bible prophecy say about a two-state solution? You've heard me on this before, haven't you? So I'm not going to go through all the detail again. I'm just going to remind you of what I said. And I'll let you have a look at it for yourself. If you're not convinced by these three passages of Scripture, then there's nothing I can do for you. They are so obvious. You'll see why in a second. Joel 3 verse 4. Zephaniah 2 verses 4 to 11. Ezekiel 25 verses 15 to 17 are clear about the fact that there will be a Palestinian state called Palestine, all right? And it's also said to be a nation. So look at those three references in your own time. Each context concerns the latter days and events involving the redemption of Israel. Each presages the existence of a nation. That word is used. A nation called Palestine, all right? There will be a Palestinian state, brothers and sisters. Check me out. If you can find where that's wrong, tell me about it. You won't find it to be wrong. So Israel is against it. Doesn't matter. Trump will achieve it. I want to show you why. The role of Saudi Arabia in all of this. We know they're important. They are the D-dam of Ezekiel 38, verse 13. It will be, that is, Saudi Arabia, along with the UAE and Oman and Yemen, the Sheba of Ezekiel 38:13, an ally of Israel at the time of Armageddon. The price for this alliance is settlement of the Palestinian issue, whether Trump likes it or not, whether Israel likes it or not. An article in the Newsweek on the 24th of November last year made that position very clear. And the recent meeting between Trump and MBS, that's Mohammed bin Salman, the ruler of Saudi Arabia, in the White House, has confirmed that very fact to the US president. And the message was this: no Palestinian state, no progress on the Abraham Accord. That's the last word. No Palestinian state, Saudi Arabia won't be going in to the Abraham Accord. That's one of Trump's objectives. That's what he wants to achieve in his 4 years of office. He wants to expand the Abraham Accord, so he goes down in history as the man who brought peace to the Middle East. How does he get there? Well, this is what he's facing. That article in the Newsweek had a heading: Saudi Arabia has its own deal of the century. That's the name of Trump's book, by the way, for Trump. What is it? Well, it outlined the situation awaiting him when he took office. Saudi Arabia is wedded to a two-state solution going back to 2002 and will not compromise on it because they are the leader of the Sunni Arab world. There's nothing they can do. They would be an outcast from the Arab world if they didn't go down that path. They've got no choice. In 2024, Iran, which is Shiite, and Saudi Arabia, which is Sunni, and they hate each other, temporarily repaired their relationship through China's intervention, and it was thought that Saudi Arabia was tinkering with joining the BRICS group, which is opposed to the US, wants to bring the US dollar down, all right? So what do you reckon was happening in the Pentagon? Apoplexy, all right, at what might happen in Saudi Arabia. This is their position. Abdullah bin Farah al-Shaya, the Arabian military attaché in Washington, commented this: "This is a complex and thorny issue," he said, "that was at the same time one of the most important pending issues of the Middle East, one in which Saudi Arabia was urgently looking for peaceful solutions." Read the next words. "As long as they serve and enhance its interests, but not at the expense of the Palestinian cause." How's Trump going to get around that, you reckon? Oh, I know how I'd get around it. I'd go back to the original idea. So what was the original idea? You've seen this 100 times, haven't you? This Debka report from the 16th of December 2017, that's 8 years ago. It said this: "The old Saudi Arab League peace plan of 2003 is a dead letter. Riyadh has dropped its demand that Israel accept a Palestinian state with East Jerusalem as its capital." And now it's not going to happen. "Since the original Saudi peace proposal, which the prince, that's Mohammed bin Salman, called MBS, called Plan A, was dead, it is necessary to move forward to Plan B." You've always got to have a Plan B, don't you? So what is Plan B? It's essentially as follows. The state of Palestine would be established in the Gaza Strip, plus large tracts of territory to be annexed from northern Sinai. Egypt has agreed to this outline. Egypt does not want Palestinians in their country. They've already got millions of Sudanese in their country. They don't want Palestinians. So where are you going to put them? Give them more land. Land that Egypt doesn't want anyway, in northern Sinai. And create a state along the coastline, which all three of those references, Joel 3 verse 4, Zephaniah 2 verses 4 to 11, and Ezekiel 25:15 to 7 say that that state will have. It's going to have a coastline. West Bank doesn't have a coastline. All right? End of story, brothers and sisters. The Bible is being fulfilled before our eyes. Oh, it might take a little while. but it'll get there. Expanding the Abraham Accord. This was November the 19th this year. Trump designates Saudi Arabia as major non-NATO ally. Really? President Trump announces Saudi Arabia's designation as a major non-NATO ally during a White House dinner with Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, said Israeli national news. So, yeah, I think that meeting would have been an interesting one, because Trump now knows that if he wants a Nobel Peace Prize, if he wants to expand the Abraham Accord and get Saudi Arabia into it, there's only one way ahead. He's got to agree to the establishment of a Palestinian state in the Gaza Strip. He made it clear, didn't he? He made it very clear at the outset that that was his purpose in life. What about Egypt in all of this? Well, Egypt's role in Gaza was set out in this article in August this year. Egypt is training thousands of Palestinians for post-war Gaza security force. Either Hamas or chaos was the heading. Egypt is training potential Palestinian recruits at military academies. Most come from the Palestinian Authority's security services and some from Fatah members, Hamas's rival. They join from Gaza as well. So Egypt's got involved. Trump's Gaza plan, this is from another commentator from the Foundation for Defence of Democracies, he said, Trump's Gaza plan is something that the other side could never accept. He means the Arab side. But now the onus is on the Arabs to counter if they don't like it. He got their attention by, of course, saying he was going to create the Riviera in the Gaza Strip. He got their attention. He has reinitiated a wider conversation about the future of the Middle East. And this is what came out on July 29. Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Egypt call on Hamas to disarm and leave Gaza. 17 nations agreed on a statement calling for Hamas to lay down its arms and end its rule in Gaza. Now, they haven't yet, but they will eventually, probably because Israel will smash. So here we've got, brothers and sisters, progress towards a Palestinian state in the Gaza Strip. Because there's no way the Arab states will accept hundreds of thousands of Gazans as refugees. They've made that very clear. Their only option is to push for a Palestinian state in that strip. Egypt's got its plan for Gaza. See, this is going back to February this year. Egypt is developing a plan to rebuild Gaza to counter President Trump's proposal. Egypt's Al-Akram said the plan calls for establishing secure areas within Gaza where Palestinians can live initially while Egyptian and international construction firms remove the rubble and rehabilitate the infrastructure. Egyptian officials have been discussing the plan with European diplomats as well as with Saudi Arabia, Qatar and the UAE, concluding ways to fund the reconstruction. US Secretary of State Marco Rubio said on Thursday, if the Arab countries have a better plan than Trump's plan, then that's great. You can see where that's going, can't you? I can see where that's going. We're going to have a Palestinian state, just like the Bible requires. Let's turn to the state of the world. Woke. How bad has it got, brothers and sisters? The going forth of humanism is now mature, isn't it? And I made this point before, Revelation 16:14. For they are, these three unclean spirits, liberty, equality, fraternity, they are the spirits of devils or insanity, as that idea is, working signs which go forth. Go forth. The word means to be in your face, basically. To go forth, to depart, to flow forth, to project from the mouth. That's the way that word's used in the New Testament. Woke has completed the task begun by Fabianism. Now, Fabianism is gradualism. You know, just go slowly. So in the 60s and 70s, it went slowly. Now it's in your face. But you can't turn on anything, can you, without it coming into your face? Kids can't go to school without it being in their face. It's all over. Social media has made sure of that. So it's completed the task begun by Fabianism so that no one on the planet is unconscious of its omnipresent and radical demands. And here's just a few brief comments about the insanity that's been brought about by humanism and wokeism. There are now woke influencers who are preaching that children owe nothing to their parents and should ditch them. I'd suggest they look in a mirror. Do you look like your parents? Sort of? Yeah, no, you're out. You're gone. Ditch your parents. Get rid of your parents. But you owe nothing to them, they're preaching. This is the extreme insanity of wokeism. Parents are now using GPT, or artificial intelligence, to rear their children. That's going to be successful, isn't it? Parents should ask consent of their baby, months old or weeks old, to change their nappy. It's called diapers in North America. You've got to ask the baby, who's crying, do you want your nappy changed? Come on. What next? A mum who spent 10 years gentle parenting, they call it. Don't get in the kids' way. Don't stop them doing anything. Don't tell them off. Don't shout at them, all right? Don't smack them. Definitely don't smack them, all right? Gentle parenting. Now admits it was a big mistake. Of course it was a big mistake. Many parents are now being blamed for every problem their adult children experience, including their mental health. And I know that's true from my own experience. So watch out, brothers and sisters. If your parents are teenage children, watch out. Because they're going to blame you for their problems. This is the stupidity, the insanity of humanism. And don't think that Christadelphia is unaffected, because it is. It's a great warning. We're in that final testing time, brothers and sisters. We're going to stand this test. We're going to go the way of the world. The world has created a monster that will soon be unleashed upon it in the time of trouble such as never was. Guns are tightly controlled in Australia, not in America, but in Australia. So knives and machetes have become the weapon of choice for young people. Kid died in Perth today, one in Victoria yesterday. And in Victoria, there are strict laws which have recently been introduced to restrict a rash of stabbings. Police there have confiscated over 15,000 blades this year from young people in the main. They don't go out without a knife on it. In America, where guns are freely available, there are over 300 mass shootings every year. Mass shootings where 2 or more people die as a result of the shooting. One a day, in fact, in America. And behind all of that, brothers and sisters, is the reason why the monster is about to be unleashed. The great crash that's coming. US debt to the rest of the world is said to be heading beyond 37 trillion, not billion, trillion, 1,000 billion. China's population is imploding. Its construction sector has collapsed. And while its manufacturing continues, it faces decreased demand and huge Trump tariffs. And I heard just today that China has a cash problem. Can you imagine that? They can't lay their hands on cash. It's unbelievable. Almost every European country is in deep financial crisis led by Germany and France. Japan is in crisis. It's one of the few nations with low interest rates. You know what people in Japan are doing because of the cost of living crisis? They want to get some more money. So what do? You borrow it at low interest rates and you go to the stock market, which is exactly what they did in America in 1929. And you know what happened. This is an article, and I could give you 100 of these, 100 of them. Observers are starting to freak out. Our soaring US government debt could trigger a new global financial crisis. And they're now using new terminology in the financial world. Terms like the Hindenburg omen. Now, there are people old enough in this room to know what happened to the Hindenburg. It was, of course, one of those balloons filled with hydrogen that came into land in New York, a lightning strike or some kind of electricity was involved, a fire was started, the thing just blew up in flames, crashed to the ground, and 36 people perished. So, it just went like that. That's what they think is going to happen to the financial market. The Hindenburg over. And the Titanic syndrome. Do I need to explain that? No. So that's how the world is viewing the state of the financial and economic systems of the world. It's going to happen. The Bible says it's got to happen. I'll show you that in a minute. It's got to happen. It's probably our best sign. We know from the interpretation of time periods, which we've dealt here before, character of the seasons, that the return of Christ is near. We say it all the time, don't we? Yeah, but the world knows time's running out. Running out to stop global warming and its effects. And financial pundits are predicting a huge crash, some say a huge depression. The continuing cost of living crisis around the globe is perhaps our best sign, brothers and sisters, that it's near. You know why? I want to show you why. I want you to have a look at Luke 17 in conclusion. Luke chapter 17 and verse 26. Christ's teachings about what it would be like when he returns are very, very clear. He said they'd be like the days of Noah and of Lot, verse 26, verse 28. So what was happening in the days of Lot? Well, he tells you in verse 27 and verse 28, they were eating and drinking. He means restaurant-type eating, club and pub-type drinking. Not talking about sitting around your kitchen table at home. Marrying and being given in marriage. He's talking about people popping into one relationship and out of that into another one, and out of that into another one. Do you know that a recent survey in America of adults said that worked out that the average sexual relationships between people was 12. Every adult, on an average, some would have been nil or one, all right, on an average, which means there's a lot of people in the hundreds, 12 people in your life as a sexual partner. We're in the days of Noah, all right? That's what the Lord said would happen. Buying and selling, building and planting, all right, all of those things, they're happening. But for not much longer, because there's a cost of living crisis. So what do you do if you can't pay your power bill? Well, you put your hand out to the government and you go down to the local restaurant. You make sense of that? Go and try. Go and have a look. See who's going to the restaurants. They'll forego other things, but they will not forego that. So Christ had his finger on the pulse. He knew exactly what was going to happen. Because when the day came, all of their prosperity disappeared in a day. It was gone. You know, Daniel 12, verses 1 and 2, one of my favourite references, and you've heard me say this 100 times. Look at that phrase, and at that time, in the green. The second part of that is about the resurrection of the dead. The first one is about Christ coming as a judge. At time shall Michael stand up, the great prince which standeth for the children of thy people. And there shall be a time of trouble such as never was since there was a nation, even to that same time. And at that time, thy people, Daniel, shall be delivered. Where are they? They're written in the book of life. Every one that shall be found written in the book. And many of them that sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake, some to everlasting life and some to shame and everlasting contempt. That day of trouble is not far away. And the pattern was set for us in the days of Noah and the days of Lot. When God shut the door of the ark, it began to rain. And all their prosperity was gone within a week. When he ripped Lot out of Sodom with his family, within an hour, Sodom and Gomorrah were a burning heap. All their prosperity was gone. We're close. We just need to wait. We need to be patient. We need to be faithful. We need to be loyal. Wait for it. It will surely come, said Habakkuk. And it will not tarry. Brothers and sisters, we have good reason, don't we? We have really good reason to hold on till that day comes.
Don't forget to hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Drop a comment in the comment section and let us know what you thought. And make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new upload. Please share it and spread the word. Thanks for watching, and remember to come back soon.